It's Lucy Litch, and this is Tiny House Conversations. It's the Australian-based podcast where I interview experienced tiny houses, tiny builders, and adventurers in the tiny world so you can discover how to create, build, and transition into tiny life. Before we get into the show, I want to know something. Are you a tiny houser, and would you like to share your tiny house story and experiences on the podcast? Or are you a business that has a product or service that aligns with the tiny house movement and would be beneficial for the tiny house community that you'd also like to share on the podcast? If so, I'd love to hear from you, and you can head over to tinyhouseconversations.com, and on there you'll see a section that says share your story. If you fill out your details there, I'll get back to you very soon. Now, here's the intro. Hey, it's Lucy with another episode of Tiny House Conversations. Today I'm speaking with Brenda Kelly, who lives in Taupo, New Zealand, and has plenty of experience living in different size shipping containers. Brenda is passionate about design and space optimization and has built a reputation for being an expert in container-based design and construction, and was encouraged to pursue things further many years ago, which led her to becoming the founder of IQ Container Homes. And in this conversation, we talk about Brenda's journey of living in different shipping container homes, the benefits of container homes versus traditional tiny home builds, the consent and council regulations for container homes. We also talked all about IQ Container Homes and what services Brenda and her team offer, what to consider and ask about when finding a business in your area that can custom build a container home for you, and plenty more. This was a fun conversation, and you'll really feel Brenda's passion come through. So, on to the show with Brenda. Hi, Brenda. Welcome to Tiny House Conversations, and thank you so much for being here today with me.
Thank you for having me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. So, Brenda, you've had plenty of experience with small space living, having lived in various shipping containers over the years, and what I'd love to do today in the conversation is talk a bit about your own experiences of living in shipping containers, and then I'd love to hear more about your business, IQ Container Homes. How does that sound for you?
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Perfect. All right. So are you able to start by sharing with us, how you became interested in tiny homes, shipping containers, small space living, and what were some of your main reasons for transitioning into this way of living?
Absolutely. So right from early childhood, I think I've always been inspired by tiny home living, minimalistic design, making the most of a small space. And so that passion, right from my teenage years, I'd be drawing little diagrams of how I could rearrange furniture in a room to live in a room instead of a house and things like that. And so when I sort of got to the age where I was looking for my own home, it was just a natural progression really to look on the smaller side of things, if you like, and especially when it came to affordability. Obviously, if I could build a smaller home, well, the cost per square metre obviously is higher, the overall cost is a lot less, so it would help me sort of get on the housing market that much sooner than if I was to save for a larger house. So what I did is I went out there looking for land when I had a bit of money behind me, and I found that a lot of the steep sections were a lot more affordable, obviously, because most people look at them and think, I can't put a house on that and move on. But when it comes to a small home, and in particular a container home, you need minimal pile foundations, don't need a flat building platform. So it was the logical way to go, really. And then when I started researching containers more and more, just the advantages of them over traditional construction in terms of their structural integrity, longevity and the likes, I just got really sold on them from the outset. And no looking back from there.
Oh, that sounds great. And actually, I was going to ask you, so you started talking a little bit about the shipping containers and the benefits and things like that. Do you want to go a little bit more into that? The decisions around, versus a more traditional kind of tiny home build, some of the other things that maybe made you direct your attention more towards the shipping containers?
Absolutely, yeah. So the main one I mentioned already is your structural integrity. I mean, these things are designed to survive a life at sea in a very harsh environment. So straight away, you're looking at something that's going to stand the test of time. Because they're also designed to take a lot of weight. They already have your structural integrity in the base. So certainly when it comes to, like I said, the site I was looking at, we only needed 4 piles, 1 for each corner, whereas with traditional construction, you would have needed a lot more. The Corten steel as well, it's a form of weathering steel. So it's the same thing they use to make bridges, and once it's treated, it's pretty much can last forever if you maintain it. Even when it does sort of corrode, it almost protects itself. So it's not like normal steel. It's a very good product that will stand the test of time. And it's also recyclable at the end of its life. So from a green perspective as well, you're not just going to be sending it to landfill at the end of its life. So that's the main one, but there are lots of other ones as well. Earthquake, fire and hurricane resistant compared to traditional construction. Incredibly strong and durable. So they're not really suitable to build tiny house on wheels, for example, because they are heavy. But that's certainly an advantage when it comes to poor weather and things like that. You know, they're not going anywhere if you secure them to the ground. You can put as much weight in them as you want without having to think twice, whereas often tiny homes on wheels and things, you're restricted weight-wise. And then they're designed to be permanent homes, so we get council approval for them. Part of that process involves us proving that they have a minimum 50-year durability, and you've got the assurance that, you know, council have signed off on the way we do things, and that it is a quality product that meets building code. And you can also join them, so you're not restricted in size either, and you can do that either at the time you're building or even at a later date. So some clients, for example, when they're just starting out, they'll start with a single container or maybe a 2-bedroom where 2 containers are joined. And then when finances allow and needs arise, they have a couple of kids or whatever, they can add another wing on another container at a later date. So they're very versatile in that sense as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. And what about the transportation or the getting of them into place on the land?
Yeah, so we transport them separately, and there's no shortage of container trucks and hires out there. So it is quite cost effective to move them around the country. You don't need to tow them or anything. They literally go on the back of a truck, and they can either get hired directly onto foundations if you're in a position to pull up right next to your build site, or even if sites are a bit more difficult, as long as there's a crane that can sort of park nearby on a level platform and then pick it off the truck and put it onto a side. They can lift over other houses and sheds and fences and things like that as well. So that's another advantage.
Ah, amazing. And what size and dimensions is the shipping container that you're currently living in?
So the one I'm currently living in is made of 3 20-foot high cube containers, and I've joined them in parallel. So all up, it's roughly 45 square metres.
So I know that you've been on quite the journey where you started off living in a shipping container that was a bit smaller, 20-foot container, and then I think it was 40-foot, and now you're mentioning the 3 by 20. I'm wondering what that journey and that progression was like for you, you know, starting off in like a smaller space and then progressing on and on to where you are now.
So the first tiny home was probably more out of necessity more than anything, but also a bit of a learning curve. So the section that I mentioned earlier, I managed to purchase, and then I realised that the amount of time it was going to take to get council across the line for the main home I'd planned for it was going to be probably 12 months or more, and I just wanted to get out there and live on it. So I basically bought a second-hand 20-foot container, and I don't recommend that clients use second-hand containers. We use new single-trip ones. But this was a learning curve, and it was became a father-daughter project just to do that up, to get me out on the land and have me stop paying rent until my main home could be built. So we converted a little 20-foot container. We actually only converted 2/3 of it to keep it under 10 square metres. And there was a New Zealand building code at the time. If you could keep under 10 square metres, you had a higher chance of avoiding the council eye. So we did that, and I lived there for a good 12 months or more. It was completely off-grid. So sort of got a bit of experience with the solar side of things, water tanks, toilet off-grid system, but it got me out on the land, and I just absolutely loved it. I'm quite proud of the design we came up with. It worked really well. And then when I'd managed to build my larger home on the site, which is a 40-foot with a 20-foot, and moved into there, and I actually rented out the unit, so it served as a passive income while I was living there. So I lived in that main home. This is up in Auckland for, goodness me, I'm losing track of time, probably would have been 6 or 7 years maybe. And I was a little bit over the big city life. Traffic was doing my head in. So I found a section in beautiful Taupo region in the centre of the North Island here. That was, again, it was sloping, so it was affordable. It had lovely lake views, and I just fell in love with it. And I decided to build down here. By that stage, I'd managed to save up enough money to do that while keeping my Auckland property. So that sort of served as a display home for my business for a couple of years while I had a tenant in there as well. So again, I had that passive income, and then I built my place down here in Taupo. And I've loved each and every one of my designs, to be honest. I do get asked a lot, which one do you prefer? What would you do differently? And I think just the amount of time I put into the design from the outset and make it site specific as well. So, for example, if you've got views or sunshine, you make sure you've got your windows in the right place for that. I'm not sure I'd change anything on any of the homes that I've built for myself. And I've loved each and every one of them. So don't ask me to pick a favourite.
I wouldn't do that. And I guess I love that you said, though, that you wouldn't change anything, because I feel like also, when you go on these, when you have these different experiences and you're growing and you're evolving, that you're, I guess that can be a reflection of what comes out in each space, like maybe where you were at in your life, initially was your first container home may have been reflected in that, and then you kind of evolve and progress from there. And each probably served a purpose. And so, I think it's really beautiful. And there's something to be said from just, learning things along the way and allowing things to be exactly as they are. And
there's also more and more, especially nowadays with sort of apartment living becoming more common, more sort of furniture solutions for tiny houses. So, and I'm a huge fan of convertible furniture, of dual purpose things when you're in a small space. So right from my first home, I had a couch that had storage and converted to a bed. But now I've moved into slightly larger ones. I still make sure I have that facility. So all my homes have been able, with the exception of the first one, I've been able to sort of sleep 6 or 7 people just through convertible furniture. So my office in my current place my desk converts to a double bed, so I can have friends to come down. I've got a sleep out with a couple of single beds as well. So even if you're tiny, you don't feel you can't entertain and things like that. Because I think with the right furniture and solutions, you can still have friends around. You can still do all the things you would normally do in a larger house if it's sort of designed and kitted out right. So.
Yeah, definitely. It's this functional and efficient use of space and having multi-purposes for so many things, as you mentioned. Yeah, I see that a lot. And I'm wondering, were you involved in the building process of each of your container homes and the design and all of that on the inside?
Yeah, design, definitely. Building, not so much. You wouldn't want me on the end of the world. I'm sure neither would my clients. So the first one, which I mentioned, was a father-daughter project. So we did a lot of that ourselves, and then the wiring, it was 12 volts, and legally we could do aspects. So I got a sort of understanding of the basics, but certainly when it comes to our builds nowadays and the ones I'm living on, I hire qualified builders who know what they're doing to make sure that it's all legal and so on and so forth. So my speciality lies in the design, really, and also the council consenting side of things, which is a mammoth hurdle, if you like. I think it's probably why there's not more people doing it. And I've had just about every single question thrown at me over the years from council, and have a wad of paperwork about 3 inches thick to throw back at them when they ask questions around, this doesn't meet code, or what about this, or what about this. So that's, I guess, where my skill set lies, and then I leave the actual building to the experts.
Yeah, that's promising about what you mentioned with the council stuff, and I would love to come back to that a little bit later, because it's definitely something that is one of the main questions when it comes to just the small space living, the tiny house living, shipping containers for sure. I'm wondering, so you were talking about like designers, one of your specialties, and I'm wondering for your current container home that you're in now, What were some of the features and functions that you felt like, okay, this is what I really value and this is what I want to have in my own home?
I think for me, and again, well, I've said I wouldn't change anything. I think the progression of living in my homes as I go, and also as I've, age, and one, for example, is the size of your master bedroom. So my first few containers, when you're a single container wide, your bed almost has to be against a wall. You can't sort of walk around both sides of your bed. So with my current home, what I wanted to do for the master bedroom and also the living room was make them that much wider so that you can walk around your bed and that you can entertain and not feel too cramped. So when we've joined 3 20s together, we've basically taken the walls out of 2 of them and put a wall sort of in the middle, if you can envisage that. So the master bedroom and the living room are both sort of 1.5 containers deep. And that's just given the extra space to feel a lot more comfortable, both entertaining and even just, walking around your bed, making your bed versus a single width container. So I think that space was a big one compared to my other designs. The site where I'm at the moment has got beautiful views of the lake. So I wanted to make sure that there was an outdoor living space that made the most of that the windows made the most of it. I made the windows slightly lower, for example, so when you're sitting or when you're in bed, you can make the most of that view. So there's things like that incorporated into the design to make the most of the site. And then obviously our fit out right from the outset, I've aimed for a sort of higher end eco fit out. So superior insulation levels are standard in all our homes. Our building code here in New Zealand in particular, it's come a long way, but it's still not the best. And also being a colder climate here in Taupo, insulation is something you do not want to skimp on. So we went for the thermally broken windows. I went for our standard superior insulation levels and the like. So it's nice and comfortable year round, which is obviously very important when it's your home and you want to keep the power bills low and things. So spend a little bit more up front and you're going to get a nice, warm, healthy house.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen footage of your home and what you've created there, and it looks like heaven. It looks really lovely. Yeah. Stunning views as well. I'm just curious. I would love to know what's one thing that you didn't know before, but you learnt about, once you moved into living in small spaces, living in shipping containers.
There are spiders. Much in the containers, but I'm a bit of arachnophobic, and unfortunately, it does accumulate a few spiders. Didn't realise that at the time, but then I did locate them in the bush.
Oh, right.
Other than that, I don't know. I think I've done a lot of research, so I sort of knew what I was getting myself in for. So there weren't really any surprises. I think just how comfortable and warm it was, how low the power bill is when you have a small home and it's insulated and you hardly need to turn the heat pump on. And making sure that outdoor living area, all our homes are designed to have a nice outdoor living space so you don't feel too cramped even though you're in a small home. And that certainly helped. I spend a lot of time outside in summer in particular. And
Is there anything that is particularly challenging about living in a smaller space for you, or anything that you've had to kind of adapt to or adjust with?
I think I'm quite sort of minimalist in nature anyway. And I always make sure I put, storage and utilise every nook and cranny in my designs. But no real challenges. I think council's a big challenge.
Yeah.
Obviously when it comes to getting consent. But aside from that, once you're built, no, other than neighbours admiring it and wanting to stop on the street and talk to you all the time. No, it's not really.
Yeah, it sounds like you're living the dream. You're living your best life.
I feel like it.
Yeah. That's really inspiring. And since you mentioned again the council stuff, maybe we can dive into that a little bit more. So, you mentioned you're at the point where you're like armed with a whole stack of information and answers for whatever they they come at you with. So I'm wondering, what's the situation in general over in New Zealand with shipping containers? Because I know that in Australia for tiny homes, and I think it's the same or similar in parts of New Zealand as it is over here, tiny houses on wheels are classed as caravans, and then at a state level and then within the council level, there's different interpretations of the same state legislation depending on where you are. And then some councils are more friendly than others, and then there's all these grey areas. So I'm just wondering about that when it comes to shipping containers, if you can say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So, straight away, they're not designed to go on wheels. I think I mentioned earlier they're too heavy. So they're designed to be attached to foundations, which immediately triggers the need for a council consent. Unless there is a rule in New Zealand, if it's less than 30 square metres and it doesn't have facilities, being potable water or so basically bathroom or kitchen, and you're using it in conjunction with a home on your site that has those facilities, then you don't need building consent. But basically, that's just a sleep out. So if you want anything more than a sleep out, you do need building consent. And that is quite a process, as I mentioned. So we need structural engineers to sort of design and sign off on all the cutouts, architects to prepare official drawings. And then you've got the processing of council. They want to see proof that it's got a minimum of 50-year life expectancy. So we rely on paint system, specialist insulation we use. They often push back on insulation. So we've got systems in place now and materials that we specify that basically council accept. It can vary even within councils, depending on whose desk or paperwork falls across, will depend on whether you can get through straight away or whether you're going to hit a few brick walls. So it is very up in the air. Unfortunately, it sounds like it's the same in Australia. But at the same time, it's worth it in the end, because you're getting a home that's been signed off by council as a legal dwelling that's allowed to be there, and it meets all your requirements for a stable, healthy home. So, and we deal with all that for clients. We don't expect clients to have to do that. So that's all part of the process that we specialise in. If they wish to, even if they don't wish to build with us, we also offer a package where we can just do the drawings and consenting for them, and then they can hire their own builders if they want to. So that's something that we specialise in.
That's really great. And because I know that, council wants to know, if you're moving into a dwelling like that, are you going to be responsible on the land, and how you're going to deal with your waste and all of these types of things. And are you seeing, just from your own experience, has there ever been an issue with, people needing to move or anything, or has it always just been you've been able to kind of stand the ground?
Part of the consenting process in New Zealand, at least, we have to show how they're connecting to water, power and waste, or if they're going off grid, where their water tanks are sitting, what their waste system is, and often that will need to be signed off by an environmental engineer and designed specifically for the site and the soil and things like that. So that's all part of the consenting process here in New Zealand. So that being said, though, obviously if you did want to pick it up and move, because that's one of the advantages of transportable homes in particular, you can still do that. The code of compliance, which is what we call the council sign off on buildings, that would go with the building. So if you wanted to sort of move it at a later date, you've got that assurance wherever it's going to satisfy council that this was built according to code. And then it's just what we call your site works, which would be your foundations and your services connection or provision of, that you'd need to also get through council at your new site.
Right. And do you need to apply for all of this? Like, how far in advance would you need to apply for all of this typically?
So legally, you're not meant to start building until you have building consent. That being said, you have to have it before your first inspection. So sometimes, especially with long lead times at the moment, and with council, they're meant to process within 20 working days, but with the amount of builds we're experiencing, it's not uncommon for that to move out to a couple of months or more. So we certainly, the second clients sign up with us, we book them in, and we try and anticipate when consent would be due, so that when it is due, we're ready to rock and roll and we have the materials and we can start straight away at that point.
I think that's amazing that you offer that with your service, because I know it is a bit of a barrier to entry. Like speaking to a lot of different tiny houses or people that are interested in this way of living, is because of the grey areas, and then sort of approaching that on their own can be a little bit daunting, or they don't know that process, or they're not armed with a whole bunch of, what the regulations are, and then what all these nuances are, and what are the ambiguous terms that are loopholes and all of this. So that's really amazing that you do that, because I think that really brings down that barrier to entry for a lot of people.
Definitely. And I mean, I've been through it all myself, so I know how frustrating it can be. So the last thing I want is to my clients to experience that as well.
Yeah, for sure. You took one for the team.
I took one for the team. That's right. Yeah.
I love it. And you've also, since moving onto the land and into the current container homes that you're living in, you mentioned that you've built another container home which you're renting out as an Airbnb now. What are you able to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So the site that I've got here, and I guess this is the same for a lot of sites, when you're putting a tiny home on it, there's often room for a bit more. So I built a Airbnb rental that's comprised of two 20-foot containers. So it's a studio come one bed. It's sort of got sliding doors, so you can make it either open it up to like a studio, or you can close off your bedroom if you want. And I built that for a few reasons. One obviously was for a bit of passive income, where it's a bit of a tourist town here, so there's no shortage of people wanting accommodation. And the second one is I have aging parents, as I'm sure a lot of us do, and I wanted somewhere where they could come and stay and still have their independence, but be close by. And case in point, actually, they were just down this weekend, and my mother's had a shoulder surgery. And this unit I've designed with universal design principles, which essentially means it's accessible design. So it features things like a completely level entry from your parking right through the deck, through to the home. It's got slightly wider doorways and passageways to accommodate the likes of walking aids, lever handles and lever tapware, so people with a bit of arthritis. There's a whole lot of things like that we've built into this home. Grab rails being the other one. The grab rail was the main reason my mother could come and stay, because she needs a bit of assistance when it comes to the bathroom. And so we got what's called a LifeMark rating on it. So LifeMark, the organisation in New Zealand it's a non-profit organisation that publishes out universal design guidelines. So it has recommendations around these things that I've mentioned, along with many others. And we built it to get a 3-star LifeMark rating. So it means people, be it aging or they're just slightly handicapped or disabled, it's somewhere where people can come and stay and make full use of the facilities, where there's not often a lot of those options around there in the accommodation market. So that was something I wanted to do, especially with the aging generation when it comes to resale, for example. The fact that I've got a home and an income, and the income is suitable for aging parents or loved ones or whatever the case may be, I just feel like that's an extra feather in the cap, so to speak. And it's turned out really well. We've had really good feedback. So, yeah.
Oh, that is so lovely. And, it brings up something that I know I've talked about on the show before. You were talking about your parents. There is this idea of multi-generational living, that these small spaces allow that to happen on land where you can be next to each other or really nearby on the same piece of land, but also maintain your independence and be more present and connected in each other's lives. And I think that is such a what for me, and I know for many other people, one of the biggest appeals to this way of living, because I think now more than ever we all need that connection. We need to come back together and to
Definitely.
to have that family unit like it was before. And this comes to mind like that. It takes a village.
That's right. Yeah. Costs rising and land in particular being the most expensive component. By putting more than one house on the land, obviously it reduces the cost for all parties. So it's becoming financially a solution to a lot of people who otherwise couldn't afford a place of their own too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you've kind of been so thoughtful about making that that extra home there, friendly to those that are maybe less able. So that's beautiful. I'm wondering as well, if you don't mind, like what were the total costs of your home and then the extra container homes as well?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm quite open. I mean, it's the number one question I get asked is how much. So
Yeah.
we actually publish prices on our website for our standard designs. It is just an indication as you're aware, costs are increasing all the time. But as for these homes, that latest one I was telling you about, the 220-foot cost me roughly 200,000 all up. So that includes all the connections and council fees. And my main home, the 320-foots, and it's also raised. There's a carport underneath. So there are a few additional costs involved with the initial driveway and decking and the like. And I think all up that cost me around about 300,000, including all the driveway and the council fees and the deck and the works.
Yeah, and I mean, you know what you've created is so valuable and beautiful in multiple ways. So I think that's money well spent. And I heard recently, I think it was in one of the Living Big in a Tiny House videos, probably in the last few months, that Bryce was talking about in New Zealand, the cost of buying a home, just like a regular sized home, has gone up something like $350,000 in the last year alone in New Zealand.
I can believe it. I think
Yeah.
I know the Taupo region in particular, I follow the stats, and it's gone up 40% in the last 12 months. So,
Isn't that
yeah, it
crazy?
is
Yeah.
rocketing at an unsustainable rate. It's very, very scary, actually. First-time buyers almost don't stand a chance. One of the lucky ones to get in where I did, I think. But, yeah, it's certainly something on everyone's mind.
Now, I'd love to switch gears a little bit here and get more into your business, IQ Container Homes. So you've touched on parts here and there throughout the conversation already, but you're able to tell us a little bit more about that container business and the solutions that you provide?
Sure. So I think when I first did my first time, there was a lot of it took a lot of research and development, as you know, to get through council, and B, there was a lot of interest and a lot of other people out there that were interested in what I'm doing, and sort of I realised there was a bit of a market for it. So I started IQ Container Homes Limited. This was back in 2012, and I've sort of been providing a service for those who want their own container home, be it just the consenting side of things. I've got engineers and architects that we've trained up with the idiosyncrasies of container construction. So often we can do that side of things without clients having to pay for a learning curve for someone who doesn't have that experience. And then also majority of clients want us to complete the full build project as well. So we can only do that in New Zealand at the moment. While containers can be exported, it does prove cost prohibitive. But for our New Zealand clients, we have builders both in Auckland and the North Island who service our North Island clients, and Christchurch as well for our South Island clients. So once we've sort of finalised a build, and we have standard models on our website, but if clients want something a bit different for an upfront fee, we can sort of custom design them the home of their dreams, and we get that through consent, and then our builders will build either in Auckland or Christchurch. We do as much as possible off-site, which is one of the advantages of container homes. You're minimising your site disturbance. You've got supplies at your doorstep, so you can sort of keep lead times and costs down that way. And then we deliver it to site and finish it off once it's on site. So whether clients are just after a design or a full build, we can help them out when it comes to anything container related, really.
Amazing. And how much customization is possible for the container homes?
The world is your oyster. It's the budget that comes into play more than anything.
Yeah.
But also as well, and this is why we have what's called a custom concept design package, which is $750 plus GST for a small home, or $950 plus GST for a larger one. And that's when I sit down with clients, and we sort of, a lot of time clients will have an idea of what they want, and they'll come with a sketch. And 9 times out of 10, I have to sort of say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? This isn't practical. This isn't practical. Just things like, and a perfect example, there's so much information online, or they've seen a picture of some container overseas somewhere and think we want that. And I'll take one look at it and think, oh my goodness, it's covered in glass. It's not going to be suitable for our climate. It's not even a container half the time. It's a cheap thing that's made to look like a container. And it's yeah, it's interesting working with clients and their designs and just sort of aligning them to what is anything's possible, not everything's practical, I think. For example, like with our designs, we try and keep the plumbing to one container to minimize your costs, to minimize having to join them on site and then do work. There's a whole lot of little things like that. Windows I've touched on. Well, it might look great with an entire wall of glass. You are going to burn, get really, really hot in summer and really, really cold in winter. It's just not practical for our environment here. So even if you go triple glazed, UPVC or whatever, your glass still just has a fraction of the R value that a solid wall has. And there's things like that clients, and I'm guilty as well. When I first, designed my home, I didn't think about these things. I think when you've been doing this for 10 years, you sort of know what works and what doesn't. So that's sort of where I can sort of work with clients and share that knowledge. And also things like passive solar design. If you're going to be north facing, you're going to want some eaves there and so on and so forth to make sure that the home not only meets their lifestyle, but that maximizes the potential of the site where they're putting it as well.
You want to come back to something you mentioned before as well. You said that you don't generally recommend secondhand shipping containers. Can you talk a little bit more about that and why?
Sure. Yeah. So initially I thought, let's use secondhand. It's a green option. They're cheaper. We're recycling. And it wasn't until I looked into it, and there's a couple of reasons why I've steered clear of there. The main one being council. Obviously, to prove the 50-year durability is very hard for a container that's already had several years at sea, where it might have a few dents and a few rust spots and things like that. You're going to struggle to convince council that is still got 50 years, minimum of 50 years left in it. I'm not saying it's impossible. Some people have done it, but from my experience, it's just one more hurdle that you want to try and avoid. The other reason is you've got no idea what it's transported across its life, what it's been treated with. So especially in New Zealand, they get fumigated all the time, and that's all going to sort of seep into the walls and the floor and things like that. So from a health perspective, you almost want to stay clear of them for that reason too. So, and then cost-wise, they're not huge difference. And they still have what's called single trips. They still make one trip to New Zealand with goods in them, and then we buy them and take them on from there. So you've got straighter walls, you've got a decent base coat paint, you're not having to deal with dents and rust. So aesthetically, they're a lot more pleasant. So yeah, we've just made the call to stick with the single trip ones. And like I said, they're recyclable at the end of their life. So there's still a green option. Well, not as green as being able to repurpose old ones. They do sort of have those health benefits, longevity benefits that you wouldn't get with your secondhand ones.
Yeah, that's really good to know. A really good point, because even though on one hand it does, align with the recycling and all that kind of stuff, there's definitely got to think about the other side too. And I had questions about the health side of things as well. And I'm wondering as well, because you also mentioned there that there's not much cost difference between the secondhand and a new one. So if someone's working with you on your team for a shipping container, what are some of the price ranges? I know maybe it's a little bit different depending on what people end up having, the different features, but what's the typical price ranges that people can expect?
From a build perspective, our cheapest unit, if you like, which is a 20-foot with a kitchen bathroom, is 75,000 plus GST, and that's fully kitted out. And then our largest models are roughly 3 40-foot containers, so that's about 90 square metres, and fitted out, let's say a 3 or 4 bedroom, 2-bathroom home, you're looking at about 290,000 plus GST. This is all New Zealand dollars. And that excludes your consents, delivery and site works, because they are obviously very site dependent. But I recommend clients budget at least an extra 50 to 100,000 for that side of things as well. So I've always said to clients, and that's one of the first questions I ask people, is what's your motivation for a container home? And if they come back and say low cost, I say, I'm sorry, you're better off looking at a transportable or a kit set or something. So they've got a lot of advantages, but low cost isn't one of them. That is a misconception in the market. They're definitely affordable, but they're not low cost. So I mean, I've mentioned already from a consenting perspective, you've got specialist engineers that need to sign off on your design. You need to put in additional reinforcing whenever you cut into the walls to keep that structural integrity. There's specialist insulation, which is a lot dearer than your standard bats or wool or anything like that, but it's the only product you want to use with containers because it's metal and you're going to get sweating and condensation forming without this closed cell polyurethane foam, which is the only product we recommend. So there's a few things like that that add to the cost compared to traditional construction. But at the end of the day, like I said, you're getting a structurally sound home that's going to last a lifetime, and also with low running costs because of the fact that you've got superior insulation and things like that. So across the lifetime of the home, I think you're probably better off than a lot of traditional constructions. But if you're looking at a low upfront build cost, I'm the first to say, yeah, there's cheaper options out there.
I'm wondering also, what other purposes are you seeing people use shipping containers for other than living in?
Yes, we've had a few commercial clients. So we've done a container for Ben and Jerry's as a little pop-up ice cream parlour that they take around the country to events and the like. And we've also done an office for Turner's Car Yard, which was kind of a two-storied container showroom for their car yard. And the second story was literally just almost a billboard. They don't actually use it other than for advertising, but it stands out half a mile away. And then the base floor is their offices for their sales staff. So there's commercial uses like that, in addition to homes that we've helped out with.
Great. Do you ever see anyone use, because I know people sometimes use tiny homes for like an art studio or a meditation space or seeing clients, or do people typically do, I don't know, do they do that with shipping containers as well?
Yeah, I can't see why they wouldn't. I can't say we've had any clients that have done that. So we do have a sleep out model that is suitable for that sort of a thing. But a lot of the time we sell that with a main home. So especially clients that think, oh, I need a spare bed for the grandkids or whatever. I'm like, well, look, why don't you stick with your 2-bed or your 1-bed home and get a sleep out? And often that's a lot cheaper. And then the kids, you can put bunk beds in there. They've got their own space. Something you can do at a later date because you don't need consent, which I mentioned earlier, if it's under a certain size. So we do sell some units in that scenario, but I've never had a client come just for, the yoga studio or whatever. And I think some of it probably is that cost thing that I mentioned.
Yeah.
There are companies out there that can do sleep outs for a lot cheaper, and often you're just after something quite affordable when you're after something like that. So definitely we can do it. I just haven't had clients ask me that yet.
Okay, good to know. And so I know that, with your shipping containers that you said you're servicing New Zealand. So if someone is looking to buy or have a shipping container custom built for them and they're in another region or country, what are some important things that you feel like they would want to look out for or they want to ask about?
I think the main thing is, a couple of things. One would be, does the company have experience getting, through council compliance and the like? I'd be asking how long they've been in business. Unfortunately, there are a lot of companies, we see it here all the time, that just come and go. People come think, oh, I can do this cheap as chips, and they'll, start building and then realise, hang on, this is costing more than I envisaged, and they'll go under and they'll leave a client penniless and with half a home, and it's very sad. Likewise, there are people that import from China, or people that think, oh, I can get a home from China or from Alibaba and I'll do it that way and save on cost. Buyer beware. I've heard clients ring me who've done that and they're like, help, I got a home from China, council aren't accepting it, it's leaking like a sieve, what do I do? And it's very hard to try and get back from that. So I'd look for a company that isn't necessarily the cheapest but has a proven track record, has good references from previous clients, has that experience getting through council. Those are the main things I'd look out for. If they tick those boxes and obviously you're happy with the quality, you've seen a show home or whatever and you've spoken to them, and then hopefully you can't go too wrong. We do offer, and we have sold some of our IP to clients in the past. For example, we might get an engineer or an architect who's been approached by someone that wants a container home and they don't know where to start. So we can work directly with them, or we can sort of sell them some of our IP that says, okay, this is the materials you want to use, this is the paper you're going to need to get through council. And that can be for overseas as well. Obviously, we can't guarantee that our building code is the same as overseas building codes. So, we say, look, this is what we use to get consent in New Zealand, but you need to make sure, or employ whoever you need to modify things to make sure that you can get consent wherever it is and meet your building codes. So we often will sell our plans or our council consenting paperwork and the like to clients overseas, just under that disclaimer, if you like, that they're responsible for obtaining consent in their countries, because obviously that's not something that we specialise in or can help them with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a great service too, and I guess it's important to do the due diligence as well before we're talking about if someone's looking for a company to work with to have a container built for them. And I know that you have a special offer for our listeners in terms of, I know you do some consulting and things like that. But before we get into that, I just want to know, is there anything that you feel like we haven't covered today that you feel like would be important for our listeners to hear about shipping containers or about small space living and the things we're talking about today?
Ooh, good question. I think you've done a good job of covering most things. None that I can think of, no.
Okay. Well, do you want to let everyone know, the special offer that you have and what it's like to do consulting with you as well for shipping containers and small space design?
Sure. So I consult via Zoom or phone or email or however clients wish to do so. But normally that's at $80 an hour. But for your clients, I'm happy to reduce that to $50 an hour. And generally 1 hour is all you need. So it's sort of an offering for clients who are thinking about building a container home. Perhaps they're not quite sure, or perhaps they have a design in mind, but they're not sure if it's going to work. And basically I'm yours for an hour. So you can ask me everything and anything about container homes, about materials, about the costs, about the design. And I can just sort of help guide you through the process, if you like, to make that decision, whether it is something you want to proceed with. Obviously, there's no obligation. You don't have to use us or anything. That's purely just a 1 hour consult for $50, and you can pick my brains.
Oh, that's so generous. Thank you so much for offering that. And I know that you are a wealth of knowledge in this space. And so, for anyone listening, get in touch with Brenda, take her up on that offer, and let her know that you listening to Tiny House Conversations. And yeah, I think that there's something to be said about, you've had your own experience in this space, living in shipping containers and then, helping clients and starting your own business around that. And so there's nothing better than having that direct personal experience, because you know what works and what doesn't. You often understand what people are going through, and obviously you have the council regulation thing under your belt and so many other things. So I think that's a really valuable offering and service. And thank you for such a generous offer for our listeners.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. And do you want to let everyone know where they can find and connect with you online? Where's the best place?
Sure, probably our website. There's a lot of information on there, including a gallery of our builds, so you can sort of see our standard models and the fit out, along with our standard designs and pricing. There's frequently asked questions. And that website address is iqcontainerhomes.co.nz, or .com will get you there as well.
Oh, perfect. I will link everything in the show notes. If you're listening, you can get the show notes at tinyhouseconversations.com. And just want to say thank you, Brenda, so much for your generosity and your time and your sharings today, your experience and all about shipping containers. It's been really lovely to have you. So thank you so much again.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this episode, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be with us. If you want more Tiny House Conversations, stay tuned for new episodes every Thursday, and I'll see you next time. Thanks again for listening. And if you enjoyed the conversation today, you found it valuable and you want to support the podcast, the best way you can do that is to share the love. That way I can keep bringing you more tiny house conversations to help you on your own tiny journey. So here are 3 ways that you can support the podcast. Number 1, if you have a friend or family member that you feel would benefit from hearing these conversations, feel free to share it with them, email them, text them, send them a telegram, do whatever you need to do to share it with them. Number 2, if you hit the subscribe button, you'll know exactly when the next episode is live. And number 3, if you head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to podcasts and leave a 5-star rating and review. Thank you so much in advance. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next episode.